All right, friend, hello and welcome to another episode of the Artworks for Teachers podcast. I'm Susan Riley. I'm so excited to be here today, as I always am with you. I hope you're having a wonderful week. This week, I'm so thrilled to bring you yet another guest. She is an author. She's also a scientist. Her name is Dr. Rena Bliss. And I think you're going to find her insights so helpful because she has written a brand new book all about intelligence and why we're getting it wrong. So I'm thrilled for you to hear from her, and I think it's going to help us all kind of rethink a little bit how we look at intelligence overall. So Rena is a professor of sociology at Rutgers University. She's written the books Race Decoded and Social by Nature, and she's an expert on the social significance of emerging genetic sciences. Her latest book, Rethinking Intelligence, A Radical New Understanding of Our Human Potential, tells us what we need to know about the new science of intelligence and how best to use that knowledge. So I'm excited for you to hear from her today. Without further ado, here's Rena. All right, welcome, Rena. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your work in general, and then
Definitely.
maybe about how you came to write this awesome book, Rethinking Intelligence, that would be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, I am Rina Bliss. I'm a professor. I teach at Rutgers University. That's in New Jersey, and I also have 3 children, so I'm an educator. I've been a teacher in the past. I did an AmeriCorps program when I graduated from college, and so I've been kind of in the schools and in different school districts. My kids go to school in the town where I live, which is Princeton, so Princeton Unified School District. I've got 3 children. 2 of them are actually in that district now, and then one of them will go after next year. So I've got 3 little kids, and so yeah, that's kind of the who I am right now. But I came actually from a really big school district, which is the LA Unified School District, and I grew up in LA, and I came up from a very, very diverse immigrant community in Los Angeles. And it was kind of the beginning for me with this project, actually, because for the people in my community, the parents who were working very, very hard, usually doing things that they weren't like educated for wherever they came from, they were doing some other type of work. My mom, for example, started out here, cleaning people's homes, being a maid, being a live-in maid, that kind of thing. She was wanting to be a teacher, actually. So she had, studied, she was, interested in child psychology and all of that kind of stuff, but, came here and then had to shift everything into make ends meet, work. And so for parents like my mom, she's from Indonesia, so that's, where we were coming from. And so it was, testing and education and like scoring high and doing well in school was kind of the way to access the American dream.
Yeah.
It was a really big deal for them. And so like every time that there was a test, I took my first test when I was 5 years old. It was to get into a magnet school, and I failed the test. And so it was really devastating for us because it was just like, am I not gonna amount to anything? Like, is she not smart enough? Is she not that smart? Where is she going with this? And so it was really like, all of the things that I ended up writing about in Rethinking Intelligence were really kind of germinating from that point on, where I was like, there's something going on here, and, I don't know what this means. I really, was told that intelligence was something you were born with, and I believed it. My test scores going forward. So a couple of years later, I should say that I tested into the gifted program in my elementary school. So I was there, from there tracked for college education or higher education. But my test scores were still all over the place. And one of the areas that I was particularly, deficient in was vocabulary. And I really thought like, oh, well, that's because I'm just not good at that. I'm not born with that kind of, whatever you need in your brain to be good at vocabulary. I didn't think like, oh, well, my mom's not from, here, and she doesn't know the language the way that a native speaker knows the language. And we don't speak in the household in a way that sounds like how people speak outside of our household, So
Yeah.
it's like those kinds of things that got me like kind of questioning. But it wasn't until I got to college that I started to actually apply scientific reasoning to any of the questions and like the kind of weird feeling I had about all of this stuff. And at that point, I was studying race, and that was an easier leap for me to make because my dad's from, he has all kinds of European backgrounds in his, heritage. And then my mom is like, Asian, Southeast Asian, all different kinds of Asian. And so like I already knew that there was something weird about saying that a person is like half something and half something else, because I'm
Mhm.
not like half this or half that, right?
Right.
And and also like there were stereotypes applied to me as an Asian woman of color, and then there were stereotypes that were applied to me as like a white person,
Yeah.
and so I was like, all of this is just like, this isn't right. Something's wrong about this. So it was easier for me to make that leap. But as I started to get into studying race from a scientific perspective, I saw that a lot of the kind of, stereotyping that we do comes from this like urge to say that people are of different intelligences, right? And having, ranking differently on these tests and everything. And so it was really through that kind of scientific analysis that I eventually came to the point where I was like, I'm going to write a book on intelligence. And I thought, this isn't something that I can keep for us scientists and us, scholars and in the academic community. Like, this is something that everybody needs to hear.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting hearing your story because I remember that my ancestors are uh, very much Germanic heritage all the way through, but I grew up in poverty, and
Mm,
my grandmother and grandfather came from a place called the Cove in Pennsylvania. I think there might have been like 12 families in the Cove, and you walked out barefoot, right? Like,
oh,
and
yeah.
so when I grew up, very similarly to you, for her, um, testing, getting in good grades was so important. I remember taking tests with her in the summer. She would give me like math fact tests that we would have to sit down and do, right?
Yeah.
Because and like you, I was tested for not for magnet but for gifted. Didn't
Hmm.
make it the first time, and it was devastating to her. Like for
Yeah.
her, she felt like a grade on the report card meant something, right? That
Yeah.
and so for me, I've strived for that level of perfection, and it's interesting to watch, your own evolution. But then also, and I don't know about you, but like I have a sibling who has a different kind of intelligence. He's very much spatially aware.
Yeah.
If you give him something to build, he can figure it out in a way that I just can't.
Yeah.
But he's not great at the reading and the writing skills, and so he was placed lower, and that was
Hmm.
hard for me to watch.
Right.
And as an educator, I'm sure that you've seen this happen, right? Whether people are
Definitely.
meant to or not, and I feel like we keep this cycle going. So could you share with people, for who, if they haven't read your book, can you give them the basic premise
Mhm.
around intelligence, and then we can dive deeper into some of those pieces?
Definitely. So the first thing is that I introduce a kind of new way of defining intelligence. So, I mean, the book moves through different kind of like histories and like present day kind of facts about education and stuff like that. But at the heart of it, there's this new definition. And that is that instead of seeing intelligence in terms of test scores or like, innate biology, DNA, what have you, seeing it, especially like seeing it as a number, seeing it as you getting information and interacting with your environment. And so it's something that when you actually look at, so I've done a lot of like, studies of the different fields of DNA science that have emerged in the last like 20, 30 years. And so if you look at all of these different kinds of subfields and all of that, what we're finding is that humans are all completely different from one another, like you and your brother, right? It's like siblings, everybody, we think differently, we use our minds differently. But one thing we all do is that we all get information from our environments, and we all use that information to kind of improve our situation, right? So we get information, we bring it in, we match it to what we know, we think about it, and then we do something, we act upon whatever we're learning, right? So that's why I really, with this book, I'm redefining intelligence, saying it's about learning from your environment. It's about learning. The most helpful thing that you can do is become aware that you're doing it and become confident in the fact that you are doing it. Like, you don't even need to do anything new, you know? It's like a lot of people are going to sell you kind of these ideas of like, if you just do this or do that, you know, you're going to be smarter. You're going to be, it's like, I'm like, no, instead of thinking of all those rankings and stuff, just think, what are we built to do? We are naturally built to get information and reflect on it and make a choice, do something with that information. The other sub piece of it, though, is that it's really our environments that are providing that kind of opportunity for us, and our environments are unequal. So we really need to consider things like the classroom, but also our home environments, also just the general, you know, environment of education policy and what that does for, you know, all of the institutions that we move through. For me, I have, you know, my family who are going to school. I also am in school because I'm teaching in the school, you know, systems. And so it's like, they're just, we're awash in the importance of thinking about these environments and whether they're nurturing us and whether they're nurturing like everybody, or they're just kind of privileging some people to go forward and feel like they're going to be successful with their lives.
Yeah. One of the big takeaways for me from your book was this idea that you're not born smart, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was such a paradigm shift for me. And it sounds silly as an educator. And I believe, I think before reading your book that I was cultivating students' abilities, and understood that you have different kinds of intelligences. But this idea that you're not born with the smart label,
Yeah.
your genetics don't necessarily determine that for you. That was really eye-opening for me.
I'm
Um,
glad to hear that. I'm glad to
yeah,
hear that. Yeah. I mean, especially like that you can use it as an educator, you know, and that teachers can use that information to kind of think about, you know, their students differently, because it's like, yeah, we think like, oh, you know, some of these kids are just smart and some of these kids are less so. And, you know, like, yeah, I want to support them, but, you know, I guess we'll move them into a different stream, you know,
right.
and we'll focus our energy on the ones that are easier because they're really obviously going to college and whatnot. And it's like, when you remove the word intelligence from that system of ranking,
Yes.
and you say like, I'm not about to rank these people, you know, then you can just say, okay, how can I empower them to learn from their environments? They're going to learn in different ways because we all do, but how can I empower them to do that? And you know, and we can get into it more, you know, the different strategies that I discussed, but you know, it's like, what types of learning activities do I want to give them? What kinds of you know, opportunities to connect with other people who think differently than they do and who have strengths versus weaknesses that, you know, match or don't match them, and mirror certain qualities in them, and also like push and help push them up. You know, those are the kinds of things that I think teachers need to be thinking about when they, you know, hopefully people read the book, you know, and kind of
Yeah.
get their own favorite bits of it, but also just like in general, I think that everybody needs a little bit of reflection on like, you know, can I actually even think about intelligence in a classroom without thinking about the ranking and
Yeah.
thinking about like, these people are better, these people are worse, you know?
Well, and we're in such a testing culture, right? This is something that
Hmm.
teachers talk about all the time. rankings, testing, data culture. And one of the things that you share in the book is that test scores don't tell us how smart we are, right? And yet we're still using these measures. And I'm curious, what do you say to people who are like, well, if we give an IQ test to someone, are you saying that that doesn't matter, that that doesn't really measure their intelligence? And if so, then why are we even still using it? So I'm curious as to what your response is for those.
So, I mean, I have a kind of radical view on IQ tests. I just think that they're so loaded with so many problems. And it's not just the history, it's like present day uses. It's like the way that we track based on the tests, you know? So it's like, we could just have people taking tests and have that information, whatever, you know, but we actually do something with that information. We push students forward or we pull them back in a sense, right? Or we place them somewhere else, right?
Yes.
And so I feel like it's too fraught. I'd rather not have them at all. Now, I do also feel sensitive and understand that and empathetic towards parents who have neurodivergent kids that want to kind of figure out what type of learning environment might suit them better. And if a traditional classroom isn't cutting it for them and they, you know, take an IQ test and that just shows them that their kids are, you know, performing well at certain types of verbal and mathematical kind of, you know, or quantitative kind of reasonings, then I understand why they would want to use that to get them placed somewhere. But I think that the problem is that it's very fuzzy, and from state to state it's different how, and from district to district how people actually use these tests. So on whole, I think it would be better to have other kinds of tests if we're going to do tests, right? So IQ tests I think are like the kind of you know, lowest common denominator or something. You know, they're just not useful to me. I think that taking tests for specific kinds of you know, ways of thinking, and you know, going closer to the like measurement of things like memory, things like working memory, things like, you know, retrieval of ideas, and very specifics, cognitive tests that I write about in the book. You know, those kinds of things I think are more useful, so that you can just say, okay, these are the things that this person actually is going to need help with, and these are the things that they're not going to need help with. And as opposed to just being like, here is this standardized test that was developed, you know, to really just track people for gifted education versus, you know, special needs
Right.
classrooms.
And keeping them on those tracks. I think that's one of the most poignant pieces, is that we don't retest, right? Like, so we
Exactly.
pick the lane for them, and then they're stuck on that lane whether or not they grow. And so I think that brings a really important point, because if intelligence isn't genetic but is rather really a process, which is what you're sharing, right? So
Yeah.
how do we cultivate intelligence as educators? How can we offer some of those opportunities to build intelligence?
Well, I think that the first thing is to really move away from the kind of like, you know, here's the information and here's the test. Here's, you know, here's what you need to memorize and here's what you need to show me. That kind of like performance mentality, you know, and, you know, which leads us to the score mentality, to basically divest in that and get us into a system where we're really doing problem-based learning, and we're really letting kids of all different you know, present moment capabilities to, you know, engage with the material in different ways and to learn in their different ways, right? So some kids are going to learn better from communicating and having a conversation about new information or new skill sets. And some kids are going to, you know, do really well at reading or reading aloud. And, you know, I mean, sometimes I test these kinds of ideas with my own 3 children and have, you know, just look and see it, like how does it feel and how are they doing when they are, you know, someone's kind of being tasked to kind of like read to the others. How does it feel when they're doing learning the same kind of thing through some kind of role play or some kind of playing out, like, you know, different roles of being different characters in society, or, you know, what about what if we learn the same material by going outside and doing something, you know, together, like creating something. And so I think that having as much project and problem-based learning as possible already starts things in the right place. And one of the things that I really focus on in one of the chapters of the book is connected learning. So just the kind of learning that is done either in, you know, a dyad or in, you know, a group setting, just changing it from being like, here's your sheet of mathematical equations that I want you to like, you know, do, and then show me who did them right, and then we'll test you on it later, and then we'll know who's good at math. No, like having the students be interactive with all of that learning, the same kinds of, you know, reasoning, the same quantitative reasoning is going to emerge, but it's going to be through conversation, through interaction, and through emotion, you know, through connection, through having that feeling like we're both learning something, we're both doing this, we're both arriving at the answers together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you say to educators who are like, I don't have time to do all of that because I have this curriculum that I have to get through, and this is what it's telling me, right?
Right. And I mean, you can only do what you're tasked to do. I feel empathetic towards the teachers who are, you know, because I am also a person who has to listen to what my department and what my university and what my school and all of the, you know, like there are so many layers of administration that are above my head, right? And I have to do certain things. I don't have a choice about, you know, whether I assess my students or not. Like I can't just not assess them. So there has to be some kind of exam, you know what I'm saying? So it's like there are ways that we as educators just have to do certain things to work our jobs, right? But in any way possible that, you know, when possible, when I can push back on the system, I do. In any way possible. If I'm in a meeting and I'm hearing like something about, like, for example, you know, in the last, I guess I'd say like the last 4 or 5 years, there have been a lot of conversations in the departments that I've worked in about the GREs, which are like the graduate school, you know, like, so to get into grad school, our standardized test. And so, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about, should we get rid of them? Should we keep them? And in both of the departments that I worked at, you know, pre-pandemic, and then, you know, now since then, I was like, get rid of them, you know? So I'm just one person, but I can say that. And we actually did get rid of them. So, you know, things can change, you know, even with one person out of whatever, like 25 people or something making a case. And when you can say something to the powers that be, and also, you know, in any way possible, with whatever tiny little bit of energy you do have, to do some kind of creative move with that curriculum to make it a little bit less rigid and to make it a little bit less score based, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And I love that idea of getting creative with your curriculum is certainly what we promote here. So I'm curious though, based on your research, what role the arts can play in helping to cultivate the intelligence process.
I think the arts, you know, are like the prime kind of way that we can create this project-based and problem-based kind of learning, because by definition there is a kind of connectivity in creating artwork. Also, in sharing your artwork, in creating art together, in creating plays, for example. That's something I used to like to do when I was teaching little kids. You know, it was just like putting on plays. I know a lot of teachers are elementary school level like to do plays, creating you know, dances. I remember one that I hold close to my heart is at an elementary school in San Francisco that I worked at, creating like a a performance based on the blues, so that
Yep.
like students could learn about the blues. And also these kids were 9 years old, and just having them learn about that, and then also bringing that to the rest of the school and like infusing the school culture with that and all. So it's like, just having these ways that they're reading some information, they're learning history, there's ways to integrate numbers into that kind of thing
Yeah.
as well, and keeping time, and then yet they're doing something together, and they're all synergistically really like learning and enjoying and having like a connection to it. All those kids in that particular classroom and with that performance felt very like proud and also very hooked into the material that we learned, right? And so I think that the arts are a really beautiful way to enact some of these things that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We talk about this a lot in that when you use arts integration as a methodology, that students who are not labeled traditionally as intelligent can shine in a way that they might not be able to in other arenas and showcase their true intelligence. So
Yeah.
I think that's so important. So thank you for confirming that. I'm curious, where can people find you and stay in touch? Because you have done such fascinating research and you have so much to share. I want them to be able to find you and continue to follow you.
Yes, well, you can follow me on socials. I'm always Dr. Rena Bliss. Sometimes there's a period, most of the time there isn't, so that part of it is funny. But Dr. Rena Bliss, I'm on all of the different platforms. I'm definitely, most focused, and my heart is deeply in TikTok and Instagram at this moment, but so definitely if you're gonna follow me one place, it's like, go there. But I also have a website where I have a blog. I'm going to be changing, or not changing, but like opening up the blog to a Substack. And so there will be that too eventually.
Yeah,
Probably by the time that this airs, you can go
that's
look for
great.
me on Substack too. But so the website is drrenabliss.com, so it's easy to find me. The book you can buy anywhere at any bookstore. And I know that that you can also, I would prefer that people go through independent booksellers, but you can order on Amazon, you can order online, you can order on HarperCollins website as well. And then you can always just message me, anytime someone wants to DM me with ideas. I'm always asking. I have a newsletter. I'm always asking people to like message me with their ideas and with their experiences, and send me photos and everything like that. So really, like, feel free to always email me. Rina Bliss, and you can always find me. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, we're going to link that in the show notes so that everybody can find you and continue to
Great.
follow your work. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I have had such a wonderful time learning from you, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. I appreciate you and the work that you do so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan.
Of course.